All right, folks, I want to welcome our guest to the show. It is Daryl Coyler from the North American Wood Ape Conservancy. Welcome to the show, Daryl.
Hello, Brian. How are you?
I'm good, man. I appreciate you taking time to be here. I'm glad we could line up our schedules. I've been looking forward to this conversation forever, so I'm glad you're finally here. So let's get right into it. Let's talk about this Bigfoot thing. First and foremost, what got you interested in the subject to begin with?
And it goes back to when I was a little kid. I'm originally from Northeast Texas. I was born in a little town called Atlanta. When I was born, we lived in a house that was on the Arkansas side of the state line, about 5 miles from the infamous area of Boggy Creek, Fouke, Arkansas. And so from the time I was a little child, I heard all kinds of stories, in particular from my father. My father was, the way my father told it, he was stalked one night on his way home, walking down this long road that he had to take to get from my great uncle's place to his place. He was 12 years old and it was dark and he was walking along and he could see the shadow of this thing shadowing him on the other side of this fence in the piney woods as he's walking down, and he started jogging and it started jogging with him, keeping up with him, and it followed him all the way to the house, and he jumped up on the porch and my grandmother came out and said, you look like you've seen a ghost. And from that time forward, Brian, I was just sort of intrigued by the whole idea, and I wanted to find out what it was that chased my father that night. And got older and went to the Air Force and made a promise to some buddies that I was going to look into this. And here I am all these years later, and I am definitely looking into it. And I have seen some things that I never thought I would ever see in my entire life. I have those answers personally, and now I just want to solve this on the world stage for the entire world.
Well, I definitely want to get into those personal experiences. And that's one of the things that I've talked to so many people about recently is sort of what is it that keeps you going out in the woods? And I certainly want to talk about that as well. But before we get into that, I want to put the cart before the horse. Let's talk a little bit about the North American Wood Ape Conservancy. I mentioned it in the open. Of course, we've had Matt Pruitt on the show. He's a friend of the show. He's a friend of mine, and we've talked about it a little bit. But for those that aren't familiar with the North American Wood Ape Conservancy, can you give us sort of the dime store tour of what that organization is, how it came to be, and then how you got involved with them?
The North American Wood Ape Conservancy is a nonprofit research organization, and we are dedicated to conclusively demonstrating that the Sasquatch, the wood ape, is a legitimate species in North America. It started out back early 2000s as the Texas Bigfoot Research Center, founded by Craig Woolheater. We became a nonprofit in 2007, name changed to Texas Bigfoot Research Conservancy. 2013, changed the name again to the North American Wood Ape Conservancy. We like the name Wood Ape based on our experience, the data that we've collected. We believe that it is it's an undiscovered great ape, and we decided to go with that name. We feel like that's a legitimate name, and we didn't make that name up. That name was already established in the literature, and we think it is very apropos for this animal. And it is, like I said, we're a nonprofit research organization now. We have about 100 members, and we spend anywhere from 3, 4, 5 months out of the year in the field. Much of that time is round the clock for 15, 16, 17, 18 weeks consecutively. For instance, this year we have the annual field study. We call that Operation New Dawn. We're now in the 9th week. We've had teams on the field for the last 9 weeks. It amounts to about 1,500 man hours. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all month. Out of the 1,500 hours, we've had about 3 seconds of visual this year. So we've actually had 3 visuals, but they amount to about 3 seconds in duration. Very, 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 very tough to see these things. But yeah, that's what it's all about. I mean, the hypothesis is that there is a legitimate species behind the Sasquatch or wood ape phenomenon, and now we are attempting to validate that hypothesis.
Well, let's talk about your hours spent out there. I know you spent a ton of time in the woods. That's one of the things I love about you the most is you're one of these boots on the ground, real deal guys. People have probably seen you as I have in some of the Bigfoot documentaries that are out there. And that's where I really fell in love with the NAWAC and what you guys were really trying to do, because I've had Kathy Strain on the show, and Kathy and I have talked at length about what you guys go through and what you actually do while you're out there. So I certainly want to talk about that. Well, let's talk about your hours in the woods and how much time you spent in this Area X. And if you wouldn't mind, tell a little bit about, let the audience know what Area X is, and then what have you experienced when you've been out in that area?
Well, Brian, Area X is an area that we focus on now for our studies, and it wasn't always the primary area of focus for us. It was designated Area X just arbitrarily. That was not some spooky, creepy name we came up with. We had alpha designators for all these different areas. We had an Area Y, we had an Area Z, we had Area X. We actually had an Area A, Area B, Area S. We had all these different areas, and it just so happened that when we called them all away and we got down to the area where we had the most activity, the most data collected, it was Area X. And Area X is an area in the Ouachita Mountains, which is an east-west mountain range situated on the border of Oklahoma and Arkansas. It's about 300 miles wide by about 175 to 200 miles from north to south. It's a very remote area. It's just hardly any population there. If you look at a map of lights, they have those maps of lights that you where you can see like a urban areas lit up. You'll see that it's a big dark void area for lights. It's just not a lot of people that live there, and it's extremely rugged, very remote. I don't have any cell phone coverage. This year we just started getting cell phone coverage out in the field out there, and it's not everybody. Like when the last team I was there with 2 weeks ago with Alton Higgins, he got coverage, and Matt and I were out there with him, and we had to hotspot his phone and able to get coverage there. It's just it's really remote, and from the highway it takes us an hour and a half just to get to the cabin that we have, and it's like 12 miles as the crow flies, but the road is so horrible, it takes us an hour and a half just to get from the highway to the cabin.
Wow. So once you get out there to that area, I know you've had personal experiences, and this is an encounter show, so obviously people want to hear about that. Can you talk about some of the many experiences? You and I were talking before we went on the air. We probably don't have time to go through everything you've experienced, but some of those things that have stuck out to you over the last decade plus that you've been out there and researching these things.
Man, that's a tough question, because there's a lot. You and I had talked a little bit before we started recording for the show, and you mentioned something about wood knocks and that sort of thing. I remember in 2013, I had a visual that came very close to substantiating, or actually seeing one of these animals, produce wood knocks. So it was I think there were 5 of us there at the time. This was Operation Relentless in 2013. It was about 10 in the morning. And we were standing in front of a cabin, and we had a pretty active night. We were discussing, we were debriefing of what we had observed the previous night and that morning. And from about 75 yards to the way I'm facing now would be my left, up the mountain in this area we called bottleneck area. It was just where the woods just sort of bottlenecked into this trail, and then it just went up the slope of mountain here. Heard 2 distinct, clear, loud wood knocks, just pow, pow. And I just turned to look. And when I looked up there where the sounds came from, I see this tall, black figure about 75 yards away, just walking, almost like creeping down the mountain. I mean, it was almost like somebody just like this thing was like trying to avoid being seen in the way that it was walking. But I clearly saw it. I mean, it just walked right through this gap of the trees. And I told the guy, I said, "Gentlemen, I just saw something." So I just went on a beeline straight for it. So I went there and I went into the woods, and then I could hear this thing just tearing off through the woods. I couldn't see it at that point, but I could hear it sound like just a freight train. And Then I hear running to my right, and I look to the trees and I see my buddy Travis Lawrence. He's running down the trail. He's on the trail running toward the direction we're going to try to cut this thing off. I'm still in the woods, and I'm trying to get through all this greenbrier and all this brush. And I get down on my knees. I stand up, and I can still hear it. And I'm looking, and I still can't see it. I mean, it's just all I can hear is just this movement. Well, Travis runs down past me, and I lose it. I get stuck in there, and Travis comes back about 30 seconds later, and he says he never saw it, but he heard what we call faux speech. And some people call like a chatter or whatever. It was just some sort of, gibberish, indecipherable gibberish that just sounds, it usually has like a, just something like that. And he heard it clearly, and it was up on the mountain. So I step out of the woods, meet with Travis, and just at that instance, the guys back at the cabin start yelling. We hear this bang, and the cabin gets hit with a rock. And then another one. And so it's like this all happened within the span of like 30 seconds. I hear the wood knocks. I go after it. I hear the wood knocks. I see the thing. I go after it. I go in the woods. I get kind of stuck in the brush. Travis runs down. He hears the gibberish, the faux speech, as we call it. And then Alton and a couple of other guys were back at the cabin. They're there as rocks start getting thrown at the cabin. So for most people, that would be enough to say, okay, I'm done here. But that was just, I'm telling you, for a while, that stuff was almost like routine for us. It didn't happen all the time, but there were times where it would happen, and it would just be like nonstop for, like 30 minutes. And then for the next 10 hours, you wouldn't hear anything, or the next 2 days. And then all of a sudden it would start up again. But yeah, I mean, that's just one of the, the more fascinating encounters I've had.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the wood knocks, because that's something that I have really struggled with me looking into the subject for years, because I honestly felt, and Cliff and I have had this conversation, I felt like it was something that was sort of created for television by shows like Finding Bigfoot, because you have to have something to do to keep an audience entertained, right? You have to go out and you have to beat on some trees. You got to make some noise. You got to go out at night and do some whoops and yells and these big calls. And I never really understood if they were doing wood knocks, because like you said, you almost caught one doing one visually. I'm a 1-to-1 correlation guy, right? I was in law enforcement. I was a cop for 16 years. So I kind of need something to say, okay, I saw this thing doing this, therefore they do wood knocks. But it's something that's really prolific throughout most of the investigators and researchers you talk to. They say they experience these wood knocks. So was that something that was immediate for you guys in Area X, or has that evolved over the years? And how has that went as your time out there has progressed?
Brian, we were just like you. Seriously, we were all very skeptical about them, and I would say as late as 2010. But we started hearing them, because back in 2010 and before, we were not going in there for prolonged field studies. We were reliant on camera traps at the time, and the entire idea up until then was you put out the camera traps and you get the heck out of Dodge, and just you want to be as unobtrusive as possible. You want to leave this place pristine. You don't want to be part of the experiment. And so we would put the camera traps out, leave them, come back 6 months later, spend 3, maybe 4 days, servicing those cameras, pulling all the cards, changing batteries, and then we'd get back out. So we didn't spend a whole lot of time there. So we didn't really hear these knocks until we started spending a little more time there. In fact, late 2010, November of 2010, we decided to go in there for 5-6 days in November. And that's when we heard just a number of these knocking sounds. And it was during that point that many of us came to terms with that. And we said, okay, something is going on here. We're hearing these percussive sounds. They're clean, they're clear. Something out here in these woods, and there's no people. Again, it's difficult for many people to conceive, but it's virtually impossible for somebody to come in there and hoax us. It's just, the place is so hard to get to begin with. It's so hard to get around on foot that you have to be in very good condition physically. You have to be physically fit to get around in the place. particularly at night. Nobody's ever going to go in there at night without some sort of visual aid, without lights, and just walk around those mountain slopes and those mountains. It's hard enough with lights. So the whole point there is that hoaxing, we can pretty much just rule that out. So we came to terms with the knocking, okay? And now it's axiomatic for us. That is a wood ape signpost. That is, we are very much, we are firm that these things produce these percussive sounds. It's some sort of communication. We have not broke the code. We've not broken the code yet, but it is a code of communication for them. We've experienced them in a number of different settings, just like the one that I just told you about. Here's another fascinating one. So this was, again, in 2013, Travis Lawrence and I were conducting what we call Overwatch. Overwatch is we take a canopy tent with the open sides. You know, it's just got the 4 bars with the roof on it. We wrap those walls with black plastic trash bags. And the reason we do that is because a thermal scope will see right through it as if the black plastic is not there. But you can't, but nothing else can see you because you're concealed behind the black plastic. So what you essentially have is a tent, but it's made of black plastic trash bags. And then when you get your thermals, you can look around as if there's no walls. It's like you're sitting there with no walls on the tent. And so we constructed what we called an Overwatch tent in 2013, and we started doing what we would call Overwatch, which was we would go in this at night with thermal scopes, and we would have a team of 2 people, and they would man these Overwatch tents for 6-8 hours, and we just collected a treasure trove of data. And one of the more fascinating things that we collected happens to be the wood knocking. It was just fascinating. So, for instance, one night, and I don't remember the exact time, probably 2 a.m., 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, Travis and I were on Overwatch. And, you know, we're sitting there, we're scanning. We both, I might stand up. He's seated. He's looking one way, and I'm looking another way. And then all of a sudden you hear, from the east, you hear, bam! I mean, it literally sounds like somebody out in the woods with a Louisville Slugger. That's literally what it sounds like from 60 yards away. You hear that. 10 seconds later from the west. Bam! From the north. Bam! Bam! 5 seconds later from the south. Bam! Bam! 10 seconds later from the east. Bam! And then silence. 45 minutes later, you hear from the north. Bam! From the east. Bam! I can't tell you how many times that happened to us, how many times we documented that. And then we would have rock throws, in between the wood knocking. Oftentimes we will have wood knocking. Historically, we've had it over the last 10 years, 12 years, when right before people come in, the guys at camp will hear a wood knock. 2 minutes later, a guy rolls up. Right after somebody leaves camp, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, a minute, you'll hear a wood knock. One time I told the team I was going to come in at like 7 p.m. on a Friday evening. So what they did is they sent 2 guys out away from camp, up the mountain on the main road in. It's not really a road. It's like a mule trail. And it's very rocky, very steep, very nasty. You really have to have 10-ply tires with thick rubber off-road tires to get, you should anyway. So 5 minutes before I show up, they document a massive wood knock, and they radioed each other and said, I bet you Daryl's coming. Sure enough, 4 or 5 minutes later, here I come down the mountain. So that's just one example of so many that we've had. It's a form of communication. And the thing is, chimps do something similar. They do it's called drumming. It's not exactly the same, but it is kindred in that they beat on trees. They'll beat on trees with rocks. They'll beat on trees with their feet. So it's not unprecedented in the great apes. The We sometimes refer to it as wood ape or Sasquatch Morse code. And there are times, in fact, last year, Matt Pruitt and I were out together on a team. And Brian, we lost count of the wood knocks. We were, at that time, we were eliciting. We both had little baseball bats, and we would knock, and then we would get a response. We'd wait, 15, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, knock again, get another response. Or then you would hear like a double response, and this went on for hours. And of course, the hope is you'll get them to come in close enough to you so you can get footage, film, whatever. It never happened, but we both agreed that probably the closest one was 50 meters. But when you're in a jungle-like environment, 50 meters is forever. I mean, it's just it's a long way. But yeah, it's axiomatic for us, wood knocking. It's academic. We totally. It's not even controversial with us in the least. It's not debatable. They do it, and I could just go on and on and on about it, Yeah,
I've talked to so many people that have their own opinions about what it is, but clearly I have come to realize as well that it is something that they do because so many people experience it. I had a conversation with Carter Bouchard a couple of years ago, and Carter had been in situations where it was like they were counting. People, like you said, were coming and going in the group, and as they would leave, they would hear the knocks correspond with the amount of people that were coming and going. So it was almost a communication that they were going back and forth to say, hey, there's 2 coming, or there's 3 leaving, or whatever the case may be. The wood knocking and the rock throwing is something that has always fascinated me. Obviously, everybody's seen videos of apes and chimps and other, lesser apes and greater apes throwing things, right? Whether it be feces, rocks, whatever. What do you make of the throwing of the rocks that you guys experience? Has it been in a threatening way, or is it more of a curiosity thing? What are you guys finding as far as the rock throwing is concerned?
We think they're intimidation displays. Yeah, and we've had everything, Brian, from small, small rocks the size of a nickel, size of a golf ball, size of a baseball, softball, soccer ball, basketball, watermelon. And we've not seen these, but we've heard them, big boulders. And there's no way to know how big they are, but they sound massive. I mean, they sound like, like boulders being thrown in the creeks, in the rock. And when it makes an impact, it definitely leaves an impression, because the valley we're in it's a long valley that's situated between mountains, and it's a deep valley, and it's very rocky, and so when there's a very, very loud sound, it has an echo and it reverberates. And so when they throw these big rocks, it doesn't happen very often, but you'll hear like pow, boom, 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 boom. And the whole valley's flat. I mean, there's no, and even the slopes, they're not, they're I don't know, what is it, 30 degrees or whatever. They're not, there's no overhangs where rocks are just falling down. Like these are slopes, and they're wooded. They're densely wooded slopes of mountains. And then you have this valley that's, I don't know, it ranges from anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 or 3,000 meters across. And there's, rocky creeks, and the whole valley floor is just covered with rocks. It's got dense brush, but the floor itself is rocky. So there's rocks everywhere. And so you hear these big rocks being tossed from time to time. Again, I want to stress that it doesn't happen all the time. It's just on occasion, maybe once a year, if that. But when you hear it, it absolutely makes an impression. I think Matt Pruitt's first trip there, he was pretty. I won't say he was shaken, but it definitely left an impression on him, because he heard that boulder toss, and he was in disbelief, because it's pretty scary. Because when you contemplate something having the strength to pick up whatever it is you're hearing, I mean, it sounds large, size of a kitchen table. When you think about a rock that size being picked up and tossed, and it bounces 3 or 4 times, that's some incredible strength. And that, I don't think that can be for anything other than some sort of intimidation display. When the rocks are thrown at us or toward us, I think it's for intimidation purposes. The team I was there with 2 weeks ago, Alton had just gotten up, in the middle of the night to relieve himself, and he came back in, and I got up right after him, and I went out, did the same thing, and so I get through, and I grab the bino thermals. It's like 4 a.m, and we have some binoculars, thermal binoculars. I get the thermal binoculars, and I'm just standing there looking, and all of a sudden, I hear through the leaves, and then, bow, right on top of the roof, as I'm standing there looking up the mountain, and I'm just like, okay, where are you? And I scanned all around. I couldn't see anything, but again, the vegetation is so thick, and man, they're so good at just hit and runs. They're so good at it, at just doing what they got to do, and then they just disappear. They're gone. They know how to use cover. They're fast. They're very, very wily, crafty, and it's tough. It's tough to get a visual on them.
Let's stick with that for just a second. As far as the threatening behavior, I've documented a ton. I mean, we're 300 plus episodes in on the Sasquatch Odyssey, and I've documented one case that comes to mind. Jeff Harding out in Pine Island, the Pine Island research area. He had an experience when he was like 18. And one of these things was he surprised it on a trail, and it kind of chunked a stick at him and hit him in the chest and knocked him down. That's the only time I've ever documented an encounter where there was a physical interaction and this thing appeared to be aggressive. And Jeff says it was more of a surprise thing. He doesn't feel like it was trying to hurt him, because it certainly could have. Are you guys experiencing any other type of threatening stuff? You're out there in these woods. It's clear, at least in my mind, that with some of the behavior they're expressing, they probably don't want you there, or at least on some level, they're trying to assert dominance. Have you had other experiences, maybe you or anybody else in the groups, that have experienced something that would be considered more threatening, and where they might have even feared for their safety?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So we think what this area is what we call a core, which is different from a range or a territory. A core is where it's a refugium. It's where they give birth. It's where they raise young. And we think we're very close to that core area. And we think they're very protective of it. And we think that's why they don't leave, because this is a core for this group, this troop of apes. And so, yes, we've definitely experienced behaviors before that were overtly aggressive. And those were in the forms of bluff charges. And it never happened to me, but it's happened to at least 2 of our people. And yes, it scared them quite a bit. In fact, one guy, he wanted us to call off everything. We have no idea what we're dealing with here. Somebody's going to get killed. We need to stop this. And he was pretty distraught over it. But yeah, the bluff charge, that's happened, I think at least twice, maybe 3 times. And then you have, and people don't believe this. Of course, they don't believe any of this stuff, but we've had trees pushed over before. Look, I don't know how they do it, but I just, so in 2014, it was Bob and Kathy Strain, Brian Brown, Daniel Falconer, and me. We were a Quebec team, Operation Tenacity, September 2014. So it rained for like 2 or 3 straight days. We were just sort of just stuck on the porch. I mean, it was just pouring, 8 inches overnight one night. And so finally the rain broke, and it was like, this first day when it wasn't raining on us, and we're sort of standing out in front of the cabin talking about what we're going to do. And all of a sudden we start hearing this big tree cracking. You can hear the cracks. We all turn and look, and you see this tree. We can see the top of the tree, and it's a healthy hickory tree. Just is swaying like this. And you hear this. So I just take off in a dead sprint for this tree. And Brian, Bob, the rest of them, they're right behind me. So I take off into the woods after I'm trying to find this tree, trying to find out what just happened. So I take off that direction. So I don't know how far in, I get into the woods, and then all of a sudden I hear Brian and Daniel yelling at me, Daryl, come back. We have an animal. And I run back. I get to the woods, or get to the edge of the woods where they are. And Brian is like dumbfounded. He said, I just saw one. I was like, what? He said, yeah, Daniel and I were looking in the woods where you are, and we heard a wood knock behind us. I turned and looked, and I see one run across the trail, and then it peeks out from behind the trail, and then I just took off after this one. And look, I know that I've seen them. I know that I can't chase one down, but here's the whole idea behind running after them. Because what happens sometimes, or even oftentimes when we do that, is it causes other ones to try to reveal themselves, because then they'll try to distract you. You're chasing after the first one, so then they'll start throwing rocks from other directions. They'll start knocking on trees to get you off of the one you're chasing. I don't chase it because I think I can chase it, because I can catch it. I chase it because I want them to make a mistake. I want them to reveal. I want these other ones to reveal themselves, because we have this saying in Area X, where there's one, there's more. It's not, there's not some solitary animal here. There's a group of them there, and they don't hang out by themselves. We've had multiple visuals of two. We've seen, one time, two of our guys saw four of them. I've seen two. Travis Lawrence has seen two. Ed Harrison has seen two. Brian Brown and Brandon Lentz saw two together. There have just been just a number of encounters where we've seen two together. So we have this saying, where there's one, there's more. And so we always keep that in our mind. So anyway, the whole tactic is chase after it, get them to make a mistake. So that's why I went after it. So the point is, we saw the tree. We saw it. We heard it. We went there to the tree. Brian sees this ape. And it could be just a coincidence, but I don't think so. I think it was an ape that knocked the tree down, because we think that possibly they equate noise with power. You think about it, in their environment, in their world, if you can make a lot of noise, it presents this image, this air of prowess, of strength, because noise can be very intimidating, particularly loud noise, rocks, big rocks, trees. And that's not the only time we've had trees come down. We actually filmed something in 2013, jumped down from a tree after they filmed the tree coming down, and then this thing came out of the tree so fast, it was like a blur, but then it just runs off. That was Brian Brown filmed that. So anyway, we've had a number of instances where we've seen the trees come down. We've heard the trees come down. We think they bring trees down. And that's like the nuke of intimidation, that and the big boulders. When they do that, that's like they're bringing out the big guns, because it's a very, very intimidating thing when you witness it. I've had a tree almost come down on top of me before with my wife. My wife was with me, and we just call blasted, and not even 5 seconds after the last howl that we played, it was the Ohio howl, just standard Ohio howl. We played that. 5 seconds after that, all of a sudden we hear this big tree cracking, and we're ducking because it's at night. It sounds like it's coming right on top of us. I mean, it literally sounds like, Brian, like it's right there. We're literally ducking. We're getting on the ground, and this tree comes down. I still don't know where it landed, but it was a massive tree. You can hear the cracks, and it just comes down and just crashes. And it's like, okay, you made your point. Yeah, I get it. You're strong. Yeah, So, those things are very intimidating. Anybody who tells you they don't get scared up there, even if they've been doing it as long as some of us, there are times you still get rattled a bit. You just have to control it.
I can only imagine. Let's talk a little bit about the vocalizations. You mentioned a couple of things, and that's one thing that always sticks out in a lot of the encounter stories that I document is people hear wood knocks, they hear trees being pushed down, and they get vocalizations. Mm-hmm. You mentioned the Ohio howl. I've heard
Yeah.
something very similar to that here on our property in North Carolina. I know it's been documented really in many other states around the country. What kind of vocalizations are you guys hearing? Are you hearing a ton of them? And are you seeing a certain time of day or night when they're most active, when you're getting the vocalizations and some of the other things that are going on out there?
Most of the vocalizations come at night, but conversely, most of the visuals we've had have been during the daytime. But we've got a page on our website, woodape.org, and it is dedicated to some of the sounds we've recorded, audio, and some of the most fascinating are the huffs that we recorded at close range. We had a recorder hanging. We had a recorder inside the cabin, and we ran a microphone outside through the window. So the only thing that was outside was this little Sennheiser microphone about that big that just dangled off the cord. So it was hanging right down the window. And those allowed us to make some of the most fascinating recordings of these things coming up to the cabin, throwing rocks. Well, first they make this huff sound, almost like it's like a sound of exertion. And then they throw the rock. And you can go to our website and you can hear, I don't know how many we have, half dozen. They're very clear, very distinct, because they were right there. I mean, I was in one room when one of those was recorded. I was there. I heard it with my own ears when it happened, while it was being recorded. And that's the one where you hear this thing whistle, and then you hear like footfalls, and then you're, and then you hear this like, bam, it hits the cabin with a rock. I was there for that. I heard it through my window as it's being recorded. So those are some cool recordings that we got, and those are on the website. We've had a ton of whoop recordings. They sound like gibbons, these whoops. We don't know if it's a juvenile, if it's a female, what the nature of these calls are, but they are clearly they're no birds. They're very, very much like a lesser or great ape. Most people that hear them would mistake them for gibbons. We've sent them to a number of people at institutions, and they all come back and say, the closest thing I can come up with is gibbons. Those are on our website. They're whoops. They're the audio recordings are called whoops, and we have 2 dozen, maybe I don't know, 12, 15, 20. I'm not sure how many we have. There's a bunch of them. We've managed to record one long howl. We've recorded what we called a roar. Some whistles. We've recorded whistles. We've heard them whistle. Travis Lawrence and I got followed by a whistler one time for probably the better part of a mile. Same thing, just a single tone whistle. We would whistle back, and it just followed us the whole time. It followed us up a mountain. We did this big loop. Then we got back to the cabin, and I was standing out in front of the cabin, and I thought Travis was talking. I thought he was inside the cabin, just inside the door, and I could hear this, just this sort of mumbling. And Travis, what are you saying? And I didn't hear anything. And Travis, and he steps out the door. He goes, "What?" I said, "What were you saying?" He goes, "I wasn't saying anything." And I said, "I just heard you." He said, "No, that was not me." So I guess what it was this. It was some more of that faux speech or the chatter. I guess it was back behind the cabin, and I thought it was Travis, but it wasn't him. And we were the only two there. We recorded the faux speech. We've got one instance of that on there. Heard it a lot more than that. See what else? One of the craziest things that I ever heard. I've got two things to talk about here. Two of the craziest things three things that I want to share. So Alton Higgins and I were sitting out one night in front of the cabin. We were the only two guys there. We're the last two left on the team. It was dark. I think it's about 10:30 at night. We're sitting in front of the cabin, and it's quiet. And all of a sudden, back behind us, right just inside the woods, I'd say 30, 40 meters away, we just hear a and this goes on for like 45 seconds, 60 seconds, just this low, consistent pant hoot. And this goes on for, better part of a minute. And we're just like, listen to that. in the world? You know, I mean, it was clear as a bell. You know, it's like it was right there behind us, right inside the woods. So that was one. It was very fascinating. 2017, Bob Strain, Tony Schmidt, Phil Burrows, and I, and Sean Boger were on a team. And it was about 10 o'clock at night. We were sitting around the fire circle. We had a fire going. And off to our west, probably 100 meters or so, we just hear this whoop, this big loud whoop. We're like, awesome. That's so cool. Tony, answer it. So Tony answers. And Tony does his own whoop, and he has his own distinct sound. Well, here's the cool thing, Brian. It started modifying its sound to sound more like Tony's whoops. So it starts this exchange off with its own original sound. Tony answers. I can't do Tony's whoop. I mean, he would have to do it. But he answers in his way, and then it answers, and it's starting to sound like Tony. I said, Tony, do it again. Tony does it again. It does it again, and each time they do this like 4 or 5 times, back and forth. Each time it responds to Tony, it sounds more and more like Tony. It's like it was changing its sound to sound like the way Tony was producing these whoops. That was really cool. And if I didn't know better, man, I mean, it just sounded like this really big person, this person out there. It was creepy, just really wild. And then I think the kicker, I think the best, well, God, these things just keep popping up. So in 2005, Sam Houston National Forest, this is not even an Area X. A colleague and I wanted to test this call blaster out. And we just stopped at this place randomly in the Sam Houston National Forest. It turned out to be a really, really good spot. And this is what got us started in this place. We turned down this road, Forest Service Road in the Sam Houston National Forest. We said, well, look at this trailhead. Let's pull up in this trailhead. Let's park here. Let's wait till dark, and then we'll call blast. So we went up the trail about 200, 300 meters. We sat there till dark and opened up the call blaster, turned it loud, and did the Ohio howl, 3 howls. No sooner had we closed the lid, but from just right out there, 50 meters, I guess. This thing responds 6 times, 6 howls. At the end of each howl is this big gnarly growl. After the 6th howl, you hear this tree branch or tree cracking. You hear the cracks, and then you just you hear the snap of a massive limb or tree after the 6th howl. And then the last one I want to tell you about. So it was Brian Brown, another guy, and me, 2011, and we were removing these 3 logs from across the trail, the road trail, which was suspicious in and of itself. Trees fall, absolutely, but this was 3 right in one spot. And we kind of have our own theory about that we think that the wood apes may have done this. But anyway, we couldn't move them, didn't have the means to move these big logs. They were huge, they were massive. So we had to cut a path around to get around these things so I could drive my truck through. We had left the valley, and we'd gone to the nearest place to get some fix-a-flat for an ATV we had. So we came back, and that's when we get out. All we have is a bone saw. We start cutting these saplings so we can, cut our way around these downed logs so we can drive through and get back to camp. It took us about 20 minutes. And the whole time we're cutting, we got this bone saw. And the sound it makes when you cut through a tree. We do that for like 20 minutes. So finally we get finished. We're worn out. We all took turns cutting these trees. And we didn't have a chainsaw. That was, back at camp or wherever. And so I get in my truck, and I'm driving through, and Brian and the other guy, they're giving me these signals, to turn, and I look at Brian. He's like, stop. And so I stop, and I roll down the window, and I can hear this vocalization. They've already been hearing it for like 10 seconds, and I roll down my window, and then I start hearing it, and it's just this massive sounding pant hoot. You can hear the thing breathing in, and it's like wheezing when it breathes in, and it's blowing out. When it blows out, it makes this, and it breathes in. It's like it's this weird wheezing sound, and it does this and it's so loud you can hear it reverberate. I mean, it's just loud. loud. It's like, what in the world? And so it, just as it stops, then you hear these coyotes like whimpering and like crying and whimpering. So we go after this thing. We try to, we start going in there after it, and we never could find it. But that was from Bizarro, and yeah. So those are some of the things we've heard. It's crazy stuff.
Yeah, the vocalization thing has always fascinated me because people hear some weird stuff. Even with the mimicry, as you were talking, I wrote down mimicry because I've talked to people. Ron Moorhead comes to mind. Ron's been on the show a couple of times and talked about some of the weird metallic sounds that they heard 8 miles deep in the woods, like car doors slamming, and even I think he described once hearing a cowbell.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't make sense. And I think these things are sort of like the parrots of the forest. And in some cases, I think they really do a lot of mimicry. It's really strange stuff. I want to talk a little bit about when Matt was on, gosh, almost 2 years ago now, we had Matt on the show. We were talking about sort of the North American Wood Ape Conservancy motto, and what the goal was to basically harvest a specimen of one of these creatures because science demands what it demands, right? I believe that, I've had conversations with people recently who think that we can even, maybe move past this and not have to have a body to prove the species. But I know when at least you guys started going out there, and I may be wrong, was that not one of the things that you guys were trying to do, is harvest a specimen? And is that still the case today, or are you guys sort of amending the way that you're going about your research?
Well, it wasn't always that way. In the early years, we were all about getting photographs and film. And then we got away from that for a while, and we focused solely on specimen collection. We don't like to use the word harvest. That sounds more like hunting. We are trying to collect holotype for purposes of scientific documentation and validation. Because science requires a specimen, because it has to be independently verified. It has to be independently examined. It has to be poked. It has to be prodded. And we didn't make the rules. We don't make the rules for science, but that is what science demands. To this day, it does. You still have people think that those days were from the 19th century. That's not correct. Scientists still collect specimens today. There's a recent monkey listed as a new species, and they collected 2 of them. It's a sausage making process. Nobody wants to talk about it. People want to use emotion and talk about how horrible it is and how mean we are, and how just we're despicable, we're disgusting because we want to collect one. It's one that we don't want to. It's a science requires, and if this thing's going to be listed as a species, it's going to have to be done with the collection of a specimen, whether somebody proactively does it, whether someone passively does it with a logging truck, whether someone finds a body, a corpus. It's going to take a specimen to have the thing conclusively demonstrated as a legitimate species. Now, having said that, we have done a pivot, and I will say by that, what I mean by that is that we are now focusing at least 50% of our efforts on getting photographs and film. And that is because we believe there can be great value in collecting clear photographic, videographic evidence. And it in and of itself, it's not going to get the species listed. However, we believe it is our position, our firm conviction, that photograph and film could then start a chain of events that could then lead to definitive validation of the species. In other words, by bringing in others with resources, bringing in other people who can help, other people who can contribute, and can help us, can help whoever facilitate what needs to be done so that the species can be formally documented and recognized. So So we believe there's great value in good photographs and film. And I don't mean blob squatches. I don't mean a photograph that's controversial. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about clear photographs where you have a series of photographs, maybe a good 30-second video, as you would, a gorilla in the zoo. I'm talking about good, clear photographs. We think that's possible. I've seen these things a number of times, and I used to carry a long gun. Now I carry a camera. I'm confident that I can get, the next time I see one, if I get another opportunity like I've had in the past, I'll be able to get good film, good photographs. Not film. I'm not trying to get film. I'm trying to get photographs. But I can get good photographs. I'm confident of it. That is if I'm presented with another opportunity. So we have now part of our organization. It's called the Camera Corps, and those are people who are designated to get photographs and film. We only have a small number of people who are actually designated as collectors. They're specialists and they're highly trained, got an extensive background, and it's like maybe a half dozen people out of 100 that have that designation. And then a large portion of the rest of the organization is dedicated to the Camera Corps. So yes, it's going to take a body. Unfortunately, I don't want to have to do it. Nobody really does. Nobody does. None of us do. It's dirty business. And unfortunately, like I said, we didn't make the rules, because if we did, we'd set the bar as low as we could. We would have already met the bar if we made the rules, but we didn't. The rules have a very high setting. It's a very high standard, and it should. We're talking about a species here that defies reason, really. I mean, it's tough to wrap your mind around. And I was that way before I saw one with my own eyes. It was, even though I heard all the stories growing up, even though I'd heard them all my life, it was difficult for me to wrap my mind around it. And I didn't fully until I saw one. At that point, that's when I said, oh my gosh, they are real. You gotta be kidding me. These things are real, man. And it's just a matter of time, because I'm telling you, man, there is a troop of apes in Area X in the Ouachita Mountains. And reasonable inference then tells us that if there is one of these troops in the interior highlands of North America, then there are other areas in North America that have them as well. Because they got to the interior highlands, they must have. But again, it's a reasonable inference to say that they crossed the Bering Land Bridge like every other so many other North American species, and they made it this far into the middle of the continent. It got to be in the Northwest, got to be in other places. So I think it's just people that just want to turn their nose at this and just say it's silly. There's no way these things can exist. I think they're just it's just head in the sand. For me, science is all about discovery. It's all about inquisitiveness, curiosity, seeing what's out there, seeing why can't you just investigate it? It's certainly worthy of that when you have tens of thousands of eyewitnesses. So anyway,
I definitely agree. And that's what keeps coming. I keep coming back to the well, and I keep doing the show and document as many encounters as possible, because I too want to see those answers answered. And I think we've had this sort of back and forth on the show over the last 6 or 8 months. I've been so frustrated with just the way things are. Cliff and I kind of had this conversation when I had him on recently about the lack of, or what appears to be a lack of, real forward progress with the subject in general, right? And I say like lack of evidence, and Cliff of course calls me to the carpet and he's like, there's tons of evidence out there. Yeah, but for most people like me who have never seen one of these things, I've talked to so many people who have had those experiences, but I have not. So we look at it as, we've used the inference on the show so many times recently. The Patterson-Gimlin film put us on the 5-yard line back in 1967, and the ball hasn't really moved a whole lot. There's a lot of shysters out there who fake videos and fake evidence over the years. I mean, we've got the Freeman footage in addition to the Patterson-Gimlin film that I sort of hold up there as sort of 1 and 2. And as far as the video footage or even photographic evidence of these things are real. But outside of that, there's not a ton of that. So I guess we'll close out there with as much time as you guys have spent in Area X, and I think you said 12, maybe 15 years you've been out there yourself, and you've had these experiences. but there's not a whole lot outside of that for people like me who've never had those experiences to point to and say, I can latch onto that and say, these things are absolutely real. So I guess the question is, that was a really long-winded question. So I'll simplify. The easiest way to put it, I guess, is why do you think it is so difficult to capture what people would consider good video or good photographic evidence that these things are out there? Why do you think they're so elusive? Yet I joke all the time on the show, at least a couple of times a month, I'll have somebody reach out to me and say they almost hit one with a Prius while it's crossing the road. It's sort of, it's really this extreme polar opposites. You guys are out there trying to find them for 15 years and you've catched a 3-second glance over the course of 1,500 hours, yet Joe Schmo's driving to work and he almost hits one with a Prius. Why do you think it's so difficult to capture the evidence that everybody's looking for to answer that question, I guess, is the final question I have for you?
Well, there aren't that many people looking, really. You have some people that go out occasionally for 2 days, 3 days. There's nobody other than us that are out there conducting field studies the way that primatologists do for the known great apes, who go and spend months at a time out in the field without respite. There's no concentrated effort. There's no funding. There's no sort of, widespread endeavor to study the wood ape. It's just, you can't, for the most part, you can't get academia involved because they're hindered by, wanting to keep their tenure secured, politics rather than the pursuit of discovery. It's, again, there are no organizations that have even anywhere close to the resources that we have. We're really the only ones doing what we're doing. And it's not easy. We've never had any sort of donor. Everything that we do is self-funded, and we don't make any money. It costs us tens of thousands of dollars every year to do what we're doing. We buy all our own equipment. We lease the land that we're on. We all take time away from work, from family. And what we're pursuing, Brian, unless you've experienced it, you can hear me say this all day, but it's really not going to amount to much because, again, unless you've experienced it, it's abstract. I mean, we're dealing with a species that is extremely elusive, very intelligent, at least as intelligent as orangs and chimps, at least as intelligent, at least the strength of gorillas. I'm sure much more than that. As stealthy as a tiger or mountain lion, that lives in remote pockets in North America. The guy in the Prius, we hypothesize, he's seeing a wayward young male that has left his troop and is now going out to procreate. So just like the other great apes, the young males, they leave the troops, they go to find mates. That's probably what this person's seeing in the Prius. Well, we have in Area X what we believe is a refugium. We believe we have the core. And it's just like, I don't know if you've seen this documentary, Chimp Empire. They talk about on there, unless those chimps are acclimated to you, you're not going to see them. You're going to hear them. You're going to find their sign. Well, that's what we find with these things. And when you do see them, it's going to be very fleeting and it's going to be rare. And that's exactly what we have with this thing. And again, until we can get the conclusive proof, it's going to continue to remain this controversial subject. And until people, can just, choose to get involved in this and not be bound by politics, by university politics or institutional politics, then it's going to continue to remain this way unless we can become fortunate and do what needs to be done. We've come very close. We've had at least 2 occasions where we actually almost did collect a specimen, very, very close. Some would say within 1/4 of an inch. We've come that close. It seems, logic seems to dictate that we can come close. We can get, we can get that opportunity again. And we're certainly, it's not for lack of trying. We've got 17 weeks lined up for this year. We're halfway through it now. We've had 3 fleeting visuals, and we've still got 8, 9 weeks left. And I'm going out in a couple of weeks, and then I'll be going out again. And you can rest assured that we're giving it everything we've got. Our teams go out there and they work their butts off. It's a very unforgiving, hostile environment. There's no running water. You don't have AC. You have an outhouse. I mean, it's just very primitive. And we're out there for 7 days, and it rains all the time. It's hot. It's ticks, snakes everywhere, black bears coming into camp. And then you got these things you're dealing with. You got some of our guys. One of our guys got stalked by a mountain lion. Been charged by black bears. So it's it's not easy. It's not easy to do. I don't think the odds are very high at all of anyone going out there for a day or two and bringing back conclusive evidence. I'll just say it. I think we offer the best chance right now for the Sasquatch to be fully documented as a legitimate species. Until somebody else gets involved that has great resources and great numbers and organization and coordination, we're the only game in town. Somebody might bristle at that. Doesn't matter to me. It's just the way it is. I mean, we're going to be out there for 4 months straight. Who else can say that? That's every day, 24/7, around the clock for 4 months straight. So we are collecting data. It's not that no one's out there. There's no one out there collecting data. We are absolutely collecting data. Now, we can have a discussion about whether or not it's going to move the ball down the field. That's open to interpretation. But we just continue to collect mounds and mounds of data. Again, you can go to our website. You can hear the vocalizations we've recorded. Those vocalizations, that's a form of evidence. Take those vocalizations, send them to whoever. Ask them what they think they are. Send them to a primatologist. Get their thoughts on it. I know what they're going to tell you. They're going to tell you they don't know. And if you mention the Sasquatch, they're probably not even going to want to listen to them. But if you can get one with an open mind who will listen to them, they're going to say, I don't know what that is. Those sound like gibbons, or that sounds like a gorilla, or I'm not sure. I don't know what that is. But anyway, those are my thoughts. I mean, it's just shy of being impossible to get this done based on the current state of what all it takes to get this done and the shortage of people that are out there doing it at the level that it needs to be done. Now, if we had 5 or 6 NAWACs across the continent committed to 4 and 5 months every year, it's going to happen, man. Using techniques that we have been trying for the last 10, 12 years. That's part of the problem too. In Area X, these apes are very smart. They learn just like we learn. So you teach them a trick, well, they get keen to it, and chances are they're not going to respond to it much, if at all, anymore in the future. Whereas if you go to a new area that hasn't been exposed to some of the things we've done, the chances of success are going to be a lot greater. It's like, I wish we could go back in time, knowing what we know now, back to 2012. It'd be a different game.
Well, I definitely appreciate it, Daryl Coyler. I'm glad you guys are out there doing what you're doing. I sit behind a microphone and collect my data, so I don't have to deal with the things that you do, and I am certainly glad that you guys are out there doing it. Everybody go and check out the website. I'll have it linked in the show notes for you guys to go over and check it out. You can check out some of those vocalizations that Daryl's talked about and some of the other things that they've collected over the years. Daryl, I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule and coming on the show, man. I've had a blast. It's been an honor and a pleasure to have you on. It really has.
My pleasure, Brian. Thank you very much for having me.
They say you're